Welcome everybody. My name is Allie O'Shea and welcome to my podcast, Soul Expansion and Inspiration. Today I have a wonderful guest called JoAnne Johnson with us, and JoAnne is a spiritual life coach. She says that she has manifested miracles of help and universal assistance. She has used focusing techniques to pull herself out of depression in as little as 3 days. And she has completely healed emotional wounds by changing her thought pattern with enough repetition that the hurt literally goes away. So welcome, JoAnne. How are you?
Thank you so much, Allie. I am doing great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to share this with everyone today. So very nice. Thank you.
Fantastic. So would you like to tell everybody a bit about what we just spoke about there, what I just explained that you've manifested in your life? Amazing things, it sounds like.
Yes, actually, honestly, I have. My journey with manifesting started a long time ago. When I was like in my 20s, I just started realizing how my thoughts and things I was thinking were manifesting like in real ways on the television or on license plates or what have you. And it would always strike me as like what's going on? I didn't tell anybody, and there it is as I'm walking by. So it started sort of that way, and I had an amazing experience one time of getting from Texas to Colorado with only universal assistance. I had no money, no food, and anything, and I made it in less than 24 hours in
Wow.
like the most miraculous way. Like in the end of the trip, I had a gas truck come to fill me up, but I had left to go to a gas station, and then another car broke down in the area that I was at. So the gas truck stayed to jump the car and ended up filling me up with gas. Like the whole universe was just like conspiring to help me. And it was just so obvious at that time. I just had to figure out, what else was going on. And that led down later and later to manifesting, like deliberately with the teachings of Abraham. And I manifested my husband at the time, and I've manifested cars and dogs and you name it, deliberately. But the most exciting, I think, thing that I've manifested for myself was the ability to change my emotional state. Like we mentioned, pulling myself out of a depression in 3 days was one of the most miraculous things I've ever experienced, and it's life-changing. So I'm excited.
That's amazing. So, I mean, I took myself out of 25 years of severe depression and suicidal thoughts, and I spent a month on suicide watch myself in my early 20s. So, it really does work, but to do it in 3 days is phenomenal. And really, so do you want to tell us a little bit more about that and what you mean by that? Like, how did you, was it a process that you went through each day?
Absolutely. So I was actually a victim of domestic violence in 2017. And so I ended up with a broken nose, and I had to file for divorce immediately, following that weekend. So luckily I was able to stay at my house with my children, but it's just life-changing and sudden, and all of the emotions that go along with that. So by December, of course, I had fallen into a deep depression. I just had felt like my life was over. I had moved to this town. I was 700 miles from my family, and I was alone. And at the time, my kids were gone with their dad for Christmas, and I couldn't even get off the couch without crying. I was watching Fixer Upper, and I'm like so thankful to HGTV and like Chip and Joanna Gaines, because that was the only show that I could watch for like 10-minute increments to keep myself from losing it. Like if I would just go to get something to eat, I would be crying. So it was bad, and I couldn't work, and I couldn't, I needed to get back to it for my kids, and I just could not go on like this. And I have known about the teachings for a very long time, and I have directed my thoughts many times, and I understand my emotional guidance system. So as I'm feeling like my life is over, the source within me is not agreeing with me, which is causing the despair, you know? So
Yeah.
that is the separation that I knew that was occurring. But I mean, my life really was bad at the time. I wasn't making it up. It was tragic, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so by focusing on that, though, it was just keeping me in this state where I could hardly live my life, you know?
Yeah.
So I just made a decision that I can't do that anymore. And I needed to get back to myself for my kids. And so I did the only thing that I could think of. And I just put myself in my bed and I pretended that somebody was like hugging me, like when I was little, my mom would like wrap me up. And it's like when you're sick, just having her hold you like makes it better, right?
Yeah.
So sickness isn't gone, but you feel better. So I would imagine just like somebody like non-physical or physical just giving me a hug and like telling me that it was going to be okay. Like, I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
just that, you know, that,
Very difficult for you.
yeah, that feeling of relief of like it's gonna be okay. It's like so, you know, it makes you cry. But
Sure.
so I just did that for like an entire day. I just made myself stay in that bed and I made myself like reach for that comfort like over and over and over again. And you know, you probably experienced this where your depression actually hurts. Like, I'm not sure, it puts like a weight on your chest and you actually have physical pain just from the depression. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was experiencing that, and luckily I had a little 3-year-old son, and he is the sweetest little angel, and he's just full of love, but he liked to lay on me. And so he had returned home from his trip with his dad, and he just laid on my chest for like over an hour straight one day. And the pressure of him on my chest like took the pain out of my chest. And I was able to then redirect my thoughts again because I was deliberately like going to that place of comfort just
Yeah.
over and over and over. And so the relief came out of my chest. And all of a sudden I realized that I was on a roll. Like I was manipulating all of my emotions, and the pain was suddenly gone, and it just was enough to keep me going that within 3 days I was like off to the races. I was done with that episode. There was no more depression. I was connected again. I remembered why I was living, what my purpose was, what I was doing, and I was back. And it was like
Amazing.
this roller coaster.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was
Yeah.
amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I did it myself. And I just think that when we start to understand all these components of, you know, momentum and the laws of the universe, and we use them to our advantage, like you can end your suffering or you can shrink it into such a short period of time where, you know, we don't have to suffer for 6 months or years after tragedy or something unexpected. You know, it gives us
Yes.
a very,
Yes.
very
Oh,
new vantage point.
that's amazing, so congratulations for, you know, it sounds silly, doesn't it? But I mean, it is a big deal because it can be quite hard to lift yourself up out of, the depths of despair, and especially with what you went through and all of that. So well done to you.
Thank you. I
And
just,
thank you for sharing the story with us too, because I know that it was hard for you to do that. So thank you for sharing the story with us.
oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. But what the craziest thing is that, you know, Abraham talks about this, but, you know, to the degree of your suffering is like gives you the will to change. Like, so if you are really suffering a lot, you are going to find a way to pull yourself out, probably more than somebody who's just experiencing a little bit of discomfort. So, you know, when we're going about our daily lives and we're just tolerating stuff we don't like, and this we don't like, and that we don't like, and we find ourselves feeling bad during the day, we're not as willing to do something about it as when we're in those serious states of despair, you know.
Exactly.
So
It's like, you know, what they say, if you get cancer, you kind of have to stop and do something about it and like focus on yourself for your healing. And it takes something quite big usually for us, as you say, to put ourselves into that position of going, hang on a second here, I've lost my connection to source, and that's really what's going on.
exactly.
Amazing.
Exactly.
Amazing. Um, you said that you've been inspired by Abraham Hicks and is your most studied. We have that massively in common, as obviously I interpret Abraham Hicks' work. But you've also been inspired by other spiritual leaders as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about them and who's
Oh, sure.
inspired
Yeah, Abraham is definitely my most studied, as I said, and they actually came into my life very like serendipitously. So my mom had called me one night and said, "Oh, I found these videos, and you have to watch them. You'll love them," you know. And so I watched like 4 videos, and I was a flight attendant at the time, and I took a trip to Las Vegas. Actually, how funny that you're just going there. So I took a trip to Las Vegas, and I spent 3 days there. And on the way back, I was flying standby, and I had gotten the last seat on the plane, and I was very excited to just make it home. But I was a little bit upset because I didn't get like the front of the plane where like the extra seating is. So this is like a 4-hour flight, and I was like, you know, whatever, a little spoiled flight attendant. So then I go to my seat, and I sit down, and I'm just looking around, and I look over, and the man next to me is reading Ask and It's Given by Abraham, like directly across from me. And like I just knew at that time it was like obvious why I got the last seat and where it was positioned. So
Yeah, yeah.
they have just spoken to my soul, and they resonate with me like 100%. I don't have any objections really to their teachings, and so it's easy for me to follow them. But I started out when I was young listening to like Wayne Dyer and Dr. Christiane Northrup. She used to be on a local PBS station, and she talks about even how our hereditary diseases are like vibrational, and they get passed on generationally. And when I was very little, in 2nd grade, I actually used to debate spirituality with my best friend. Like she was a Catholic and I was not. And like we would get in little fights like about like beliefs, you know, like about what we believed. And we laugh about it to this day because we're still friends like 30 years later. But you know, this has just been in my system for a long time. So I was always searching for, you know, the answers to fulfill what I was experiencing, kind of, and the truths that I knew inside of me. So
Did your friend change to spirituality, or is she still very religious?
she's very Catholic, and it's so funny, but she uses like the Bible in a similar way. Like she'll get answers through the Bible, and we talk about, you know, manifesting more in terms of like God, you know, giving her something. But she's very open to talking about non-physical and all sorts of things, but it's just the terminology that ends up being
Yeah,
different.
it's very similar, really, isn't it? It's just that, yeah, as you say, the vocabulary used is slightly different. You know, yeah. So that's brilliant. Yeah. So Wayne Dyer was one of yours as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Wayne Dyer. And honestly, Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. I really like those conversations. It
Yeah.
gets me into that calm, like thought-provoking space, and I really enjoy that. So,
Love Oprah.
yes, yes.
Love
So
her.
those are
Absolutely love her. Actually, my friend Tony Doyle watches Soul Food Sunday every Sunday as well.
I love it. Like,
The people. Because it's on Facebook Live as well. They put it on Facebook Live, which is amazing. Absolutely
yeah.
amazing.
So you could just hop on Facebook Live and catch your little Sunday tune-up. I love it. It's good.
Absolutely. And you said that you learned to meditate when you were 10 years old. Was that something that was like brought to your attention that you should be doing, like I do with my children? Or is it something that you just sort of stumbled upon yourself, or what way did that happen? Because 10 is quite a young age, which is great. And I hope, and more that it's going to happen, because they're practicing a lot of mindfulness in schools these days. Thank goodness. In my children's school, they practice mindfulness and stuff like that. So did you want to tell us a little bit about that and how that happened for you?
Yes, my family has been into metaphysical teachings and since probably before I was born. My grandma actually was very into the teachings of Edgar Cayce, and he was like either through hypnosis or channeling, he was receiving messages as well. And so they had been into the non-physical or the metaphysical teachings, and I think obviously from a young age I was curious about spirituality and I liked the conversation. And so my grandma did teach me to pray at night. We would pray, but then she had taught me about meditation, and I just felt like when I would lay down and get quiet with myself that whoever was out there was connecting with me. I felt like my voice was being heard, like my wants, and I could talk, and that was the beginning of my connection. Definitely that quiet space automatically connects me. So it was a young age, but it was just natural in my family, kind of, because they believed in those kinds of things anyway. So that's how
That's amazing. Awesome sauce.
Yeah.
By the way, in case you're wondering, why did she just add that to the end?
No, I know what it means. I do. I know it. I say it.
It's actually quite funny because it's been my catchphrase and I'm known for it. And recently I had a friend request from another gentleman who has a fantastic podcast, and can't remember the name of it, unfortunately, but it's really funny. He sent me a friend request, and I just saw on his profile somewhere, awesome sauce. And I accepted his friend request, and I said, oh, I saw that you had awesome sauce on your profile. That's amazing. And it actually turns out that he has a bookstore in America called Awesome Sauce Books.
Really? How cute. I like that word. Yes. Awesome sauce. Yes.
Yeah. So I love synchronicities like that. I mean, I just knew, oh, absolutely, we have to be friends because of what's on your, you've got that on your profile.
Isn't that great? I love it. I love it.
So you said that, or not, you said there's so many different coaches these days, like life coaches and intuitive coaches and, law of attraction coaches, and there's so many different types, but you're a spiritual coach. So for those who don't know the difference between, spiritual coach and maybe a life coach or any other coach, would you mind just letting us know what the difference is, if there is any?
Well, a little bit. I mean, my teachings and my life experience and the things that I've discovered that have helped me so much have all had a spiritual basis to them. So when I've really moved energy or experienced miracles or molded my life in any way, it's been through my spiritual connection that it was possible, all through intuition and signs and, meditation and writing practices. And so to me, I'm not just a life coach. Like, I can coach about different areas of life and how to manipulate it and how to get the results that you're hoping to experience. But to me, it has to have a spiritual basis to it. So instead of just being called a life coach, I just felt that it's important that people know that this is a spiritual based practice in my daily life. And so that we all are drawn to each other, and then it kind of just like classifies you. And it is important to me, like the law of attraction is a law, and it's a workable, provable law to me in my head and everything in my life that I've experienced. But it comes through the teachings. These teachings come through channeling and through very spiritual practices that the messages are delivered, versus like gravity, which is proven by science. So they're proving it now. They're doing things to prove it now, but for the most part, it's the spiritual teachers who have allowed these knowings to come through them. And so that's where I feel like you can't really teach the law of attraction so much without sort of that spiritual factor. To me,
Yes.
it just like you have to combine them.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, thank you for explaining that.
Sure. Yeah.
So you said that healing and connection can be achieved so much quicker than any of us really has been thought. And you already touched a little bit on that earlier. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add for the people
I do.
listening?
So I actually have another story, and as you know, I said before, I was in a relationship and domestic violence was present. So you know, the fights and the things that were happening in my life were dramatic and upsetting, and so but it did cause me to focus. So I remember we would fight a lot, but one morning after a fight, you know, when you're in a fight with someone and you have all that momentum going, and the next day, like you're thinking of all the things you should have said and you could have said and how they were wrong, and you're getting your great comebacks and like, oh, you're really gonna get them, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
But like in this situation,
Damn it, I should have said that.
exactly, right? You know, yeah, it's like, oh, I should have said that. But you know, in my relationship, the ritual was never for him to apologize or for us to come to any sort of like healing on the topic or the fight. And so I would be left held with all these things that he was saying to me, and there would be no resolution for them. And so I just one morning I was getting ready, and I was having the fight in my head, and I couldn't, you know, get away from it, but I wanted to feel good. I didn't want this to rule my day anymore. And so during just the time that I was getting ready in the morning, I deliberately like stopped that train and focused on like a thought of my son. And I would just go there as hard as I could in my head and let my vibration raise. And then the fight would come back in my head, of course, because it had that momentum, and I just would do it again. And I probably did it about 15 times. And all of a sudden, it stopped, like to the point where that anger and the hurt and the pain, it left my body. Like I was not upset anymore. And it took me by surprise, actually. Like it was such a strange experience that I didn't know how to handle it. I'm like, I'm not mad anymore. Like nothing was resolved. Nobody said sorry, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm not mad. Like, how is this possible? And like, and I was healed. So to like understand the power of this, where I feel like we have these things in our life that have happened to us, and you know, good and bad and whatever, but if something happened from somebody else or a circumstance that you can't get resolution from, you know, there is no going back. They are not apologizing. They have left. They, you know, did something wrong to you, and you cannot find that resolution. Like you really have no choice but to get inside yourself to heal that wound. You know, it's we kind of are taught that you need to solve a problem and get the apology and work things out.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that option, then that wound can last for 30 years if you let it, if you keep it active, if you revisit it a lot. So to me, when you take the other person out of it and the circumstance that you can't change out of it, and now you can change what's active inside of you about it, you can truly heal from that experience. Like I feel no pain about the fight that I had anymore, you know, because that's not active in me. I'm not disconnected from my source anymore. And to me, it's just life changing. I never knew it was possible. And as you probably have felt too, like depression and all of these things that we just think are sort of uncontrollable, and these hurts take over our lives, but we don't have to let it. And it is possible to heal in as little as 30 minutes. It's like, what? Like, what? I could just do it in 30 minutes. Like, that's it. That's all it's going to take, you know? And so imagine.
It's the power of focus, isn't it? It's really focusing. Okay, I've had that thought, catching it earlier on at the subtle stages, you know, the earlier subtle stages, as Abraham says, and really catching yourself and saying, I don't want to think that thought anymore, and keep going back, as you say, almost like retraining yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, and like in the beginning when you learn these things, it's like, oh, you don't really know what the payoff is necessarily. And like when I've done these practices, that was a huge payoff in and of itself. But it has led to like the further practice to the point where I've been able to experience like instant manifestations now, where the good stuff, because I have the good stuff rolling now so much, and I've let the other stuff, I've ignored it or let it fade away. So it starts with ending the suffering, but then imagine the positive, ways you could redirect it. So it really is, it's amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
You have a gift, don't you, for the listeners? Do you want to say a little bit about that?
I sure do. Yes. So obviously the coming out of depression and the changing the fight, it was based off of the teachings and things that I have practiced for many years. And so I've sort of broken it down into an ebook about how exactly I did that and the components that are sort of necessary so that our listeners can start implementing this practice into their life, as soon as today. So
Amazing.
yes, if they
So
go
that's
to,
so generous of you.
oh, I'm so excited to share. It's just, if I can help just even one person, realize the true power of their mind, and I do feel like this is the key to happiness. Like there's nothing else that has made me this happy than, getting in charge of my own energy and directing my thoughts, so I'm sure you can relate, and I would love to just share it with everyone. So I created that ebook, and you can get it at JoAnne-Johnson.click /Allie, and it should be available for all of our listeners today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's so generous.
Oh, it's nothing. It's no problem. I'm happy to share.
Lovely. Do you have anything else that you would like to leave with our listeners that you'd like to let them know?
I just would like to encourage anyone, who has happened upon these teachings or who is trying to, who's just embarking on their spiritual journey, no matter where you're at in the journey, that, keep going and keep practicing, because it does get easier and it does get more natural, and life really does become this magnificent, like, joyous experience. And I think that's the way we were intended to live. And so like, don't give up, just keep going. That would be
Brilliant. Fantastic advice. As I always say, baby steps. Take baby steps each and every day.
Yeah.
So very, very good. So thank you so much, for sharing your story with us. It's been very inspirational, and I'm sure the listeners will love to hear your story and look forward to reading your ebook with anticipation and, really excitement to read it, because I haven't heard of anyone who has something like that out there. So it's a fantastic opportunity for the listeners to avail of. So thank you.
Thank you as well. I'm so happy that to be invited on today, and it's just wonderful connecting, with other people who are experiencing similar things. So I'm so happy to have met you, and thank you for having me. And I hope everyone loves the book and can get some really, soul satisfying information in there.
Yeah.
So that's
Fantastic. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, once again, this has been series 3, or episode 3, I should say, of my podcast, Soul Expansion and Inspiration, with the beautiful JoAnne Johnson. Thank you very much for being here with me again today. Namaste to you.
Namaste. Thank you so much, Allie.
Thank you.